Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Sophomore English. We are in Unit 6 where we are studying different myths, and now we will pick up the Ramayana. I'm with you on page 1106, 1107. This is R.K.Narayan. We worked earlier in your curriculum with Like the Sun, a short story about a guy who tells the truth all day long and he ends up getting jacked for it. This author, Narayan, notice your dates, 1906 to 2001. Let's read a little bit about the Ramayana. The foundations of Hindu culture were laid around 1500 BC. By the way, Hindu meaning India, right? India. When a warrior people, the Aryans, invaded northern India. The Aryans enforced the caste system in which societies rigidly divided into castes or groups, each with its own occupation and duties. The caste system supports Hindu emphasis on righteous behavior and spiritual self-improvement. The earliest surviving version of Rama's story, credited to the poet sage Valmiki, dates to perhaps 300 BCE. Among the story's most recent storytellers is Indian novelist R.K.Narayan. According to Narayan, quote, all imaginative writing in India has had its origin in the 10,000-year-old epics of India. To this day, Hindus take Rama as their model for conduct. And the background for this epic, Hinduism, the Ramayana, the great Hindu epic telling of Prince Rama, is one of the sacred books of Hinduism, the major religion of India. Hinduism involves a belief in many gods, each representing an aspect of life and nature. The most important gods are Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Okay, let's turn now in your hymnals to 1109. And a bit of background information. Steeped in the Hindu religion of India, the Ramayana is the story of Prince Rama, son of King Dasaratha. With the guidance of several Hindu sages or wise men, Rama confronts and overcomes many obstacles, including a test of strength to win his wife Sita. Just as he is about to inherit his throne, he's banished and spends 14 years in exile before returning to his kingdom. Through the challenge he meets, he reaches a spiritual and moral state so perfect that many associate him with Krishna, the incarnation or embodiment of the Hindu god Vishnu. This excerpt tells of adventures from Rama's childhood that occur before his 14-year banishment. Even as boys, he and his brother Lakshmana show extraordinary strength and skill. And in Rama's initiation that we're about to read here, the young Prince Rama accepts his calling to defend a sage and perform a sacrifice in a faraway sacred place. Again, guess what? We're back to more journey motif. He proves himself by defeating a demon, thus beginning his adventures as an epic hero. His adventures demonstrate the importance of bravery, strength, and respect for wisdom in Indian culture. So here we go, 1109. We'll play the same game again. We'll enjoy the reading, pause momentarily at times to try and remind ourselves at level 1 what's going on. Here we go.
Rama's Initiation from the Ramayana by R.K.Narayan. The new assembly hall, Dasaratha's latest pride, was crowded all day with visiting dignitaries, royal emissaries, and citizens coming in with representations or appeals for justice. The king was always accessible and fulfilled his duties as the ruler of Kosala without grudging the hours spent in public service.
11:10.
On a certain afternoon, messengers at the gate came running in to announce Sage Vishwamitra. When the message was relayed to the king, he got up and hurried forward to receive the visitor. Vishwamitra, once a king, a conqueror, and a dreaded name until he renounced his kingly role and chose to become a sage, which he accomplished through severe austerities, combined in himself the sage's eminence and the king's authority, and was quick-tempered and positive. Dasaratha led him to a proper seat and said, "This is a day of glory for us. Your gracious presence is most welcome. You must have come from afar. Would you first rest?" "No need," the sage replied simply. He had complete mastery over his bodily needs through inner discipline and austerities. and was above the effects of heat, cold, hunger, fatigue, and even decrepitude. The king later asked politely, "Is there anything I can do?" Vishwamitra looked steadily at the king and answered, "Yes, I am here to ask of you a favor. I wish to perform, before the next full moon, a yajna at Rama. Doubtless you know where it is. I have passed that sacred ground beyond the Ganges many times." The sage interrupted, "But there are creatures hovering about waiting to disturb every holy undertaking there, who must be overcome in the same manner as one has to conquer the fivefold evils within before one can realize holiness. Those evil creatures are endowed with immeasurable powers of destruction. But it is our duty to pursue our aims undeterred. The yajna I propose to perform will strengthen the beneficial forces of this world and please the gods above. It is my duty to protect your sublime effort. Tell me when, and I will be there." The sage said, "No need to disturb your august self. Send your son Rama with me, and he will help me. He can." "Rama?" cried the king, surprised. "When I am here to serve you?" Vishwamitra's temper was already stirring. "I know your greatness," he said, cutting the king short, "but I want Rama to go with me. If you are not willing, you may say so." The air became suddenly tense. The assembly, the ministers, and officials watched in solemn silence. The king looked miserable. "Rama is still a child, still learning the arts and practicing the use of arms." His sentences never seemed to conclude, but trailed away as he tried to explain. "He is a boy, a child. He is too young and tender to contend with demons."
11:11.
"But I know Rama," was all that Vishwamitra said in reply. "I can send you an army, or myself lead an army to guard your performance. What can a stripling like Rama do against those terrible forces? I will help you just as I helped Indra once when he was harassed and deprived of his kingdom." Vishwamitra ignored his speech and rose to leave. "If you cannot send Rama, I need none else." He started to move down the passage. The king was too stricken to move. When Vishwamitra had gone halfway, he realized that the visitor was leaving unceremoniously and was not even shown the courtesy of being escorted to the door.
11:12.
Vasishta, the king's priest and guide, whispered to Dasaratha, "Follow him and call him back," and hurried forward even before the king could grasp what he was saying. He almost ran as Vishwamitra had reached the end of the hall and, blocking his way, said, "The king is coming. Please don't go. He did not mean—" A wry smile played on Vishwamitra's face as he said without any trace of bitterness, "Why are you or anyone agitated? I came here for a purpose. It has failed. No reason to prolong my stay." "Oh, eminent one, you were yourself a king once." "What has that to do with us now?" asked Vishwamitra, rather irked, since he hated all reference to his secular past and wanted always to be known as a Brahma rishi. Vasishta answered mildly, "Only to remind you of an ordinary man's feelings, especially a man like Dasaratha, who had been childless and had to pray hard for an issue. Well, it may be so, great one. I still say that I came on a mission and wish to leave, since it has failed." "It has not failed," said Vasishta, and just then the king came up to join them in the passage. The assembly was on its feet. Dasaratha made a deep obeisance and said, "Come back to your seat, your holiness." "For what purpose, your majesty?" Vishwamitra asked. "Easier to talk seated." "I don't believe in any talk," said Vishwamitra. But Vasishta pleaded with him until he returned to his seat. When they were all seated again, Vasishta addressed the king. There must be a divine purpose working through this seer, who may know but will not explain. It is a privilege that Rama's help should be sought. Do not bar his way. Let him go with the sage. When? Oh, when? The king asked anxiously. Now,
Right?
said Vishwamitra.
It's time to go to work.
The king looked woebegone and desperate, and the sage relented enough to utter a word of comfort. You cannot count on the physical proximity of someone you love all the time. A seed that sprouts at the foot of its parent tree remains stunted until it is transplanted. Rama will be in my care, and he will be quite well. But ultimately, he will leave me too. Every human being, when the time comes, has to depart and seek his fulfillment in his own way. Sita's Rama is far away, began the king. I'll ease his path for him. No need for a chariot to take us there, said Vishwamitra, reading his mind. Rama has never been separated from his brother Lakshmana. May he also go with him? Pleaded the king. And he looked relieved when he heard Vishwamitra say, Yes, I will look after both, though their mission will be to look after me. Let them get ready to follow me. Let them select their favorite weapons and prepare to leave.
Prepare to leave.
Dasaratha, with the look of one delivering hostages into the hand of an enemy, turned to his minister and said, Fetch my sons.
Now this is typical of epic poetry. You've got the opening, the kind of framing sequence. You've got a sage who shows up. He has done disciplines to conquer his body. By the way, if any of you have ever even heard of the term yoga at all, that discipline of physical activity and exercise, it actually comes out of this tradition. That notion that you have conquered your mind, body, spirit, so that you're capable of being a sage, and that's in fact what's going on here. Notice the request of a son. I want your son, Rama, who has to go and fight demons. Let's point it out at level 1. Now we're ready to go fight a monster. We've always got to have monster fighting in these epics, and sure enough, that's the place we're headed. Notice the father, very reluctant to let his son go. He loves his boy Rama, thinks that he's too young. So now we're going to have a rite of passage story, a growing up story. We used this term last year as freshmen when we were talking about the Odyssey, especially of Telemachus, Odysseus' son, a Bildungsroman, a story about a young person growing up or coming of age. All right, here we go. Let's see what happens next when you got to go fight against the demon. Scary stuff, right?
Following the footsteps of their master like his shadows, Rama and Lakshmana went past the limits of the city and reached the Sarayu River,
They leave
which
the city,
bounded
right?
the capital on the north. When night fell, they rested at a wooded grove and at dawn crossed the river. When the sun came over the mountain peak, they reached a pleasant grove over which hung like a canopy fragrant smoke from numerous sacrificial fires. Vishwamitra explained to Rama, This is where God Shiva meditated once upon a time and reduced to ashes the god of love when he attempted to spoil his meditation. From time immemorial, saints praying to Shiva come here to perform their sacrifices, and the pall of smoke, you notice, is from their sacrificial fires. A group of hermits emerged from their seclusion, received Vishwamitra, and invited him and his 2 disciples to stay with them for the night. Vishwamitra resumed his journey at dawn and reached a desert region at midday. The mere expression desert hardly conveys the absolute aridity of this land.
Really dry land.
Under a relentless sun, all vegetation has dried and turned to dust. Stone and rock crumbled into powdery sand, which lay in vast dunes stretching away to the horizon. Here, every inch was scorched and dry and hot beyond imagination. The ground was cracked and split, exposing enormous fissures everywhere. The distinction between dawn, noon, and evening did not exist here, as the sun seemed to stay overhead and burn the earth without moving.
11:14.
Bleached bones lay where animals had perished, including those of monstrous serpents with jaws open in deadly thirst. Into these enormous jaws had rushed, says the poet, elephants desperately seeking shade. All dead and fossilized, the serpent and the elephant alike. Heat haze rose and singed the very heavens. While traversing this ground, Vishwamitra noticed the bewilderment and distress on the faces of the young men, and transmitted to them mentally 2 mantras, called Bala and Adi Bala. When they meditated on and recited these incantations, the arid atmosphere was transformed for the rest of their passage, and they felt as if they were wading through a cool stream with a southern summer breeze blowing in their faces. Rama, ever curious to know the country he was passing through, asked, "Why is this land so terrible? Why does it seem accursed?" You will learn the answer if you listen to this story of a woman fierce, ruthless, eating and digesting all living creatures, possessing the strength of 1,000 mad elephants.
Now, this is typical within epic as well. You'll have a story within a story. Write that down in 2B. We'll have a story within a story. And an onion effect, or for the Shrek fans in the house, parfait effect. You get this layering that happens in these kinds of ancient myths. We saw this in the Odyssey, where, for example, the story is fundamentally about Odysseus coming home, but Odysseus tells stories within that story. For example, the story of the Cyclops, for example. So here we're going to get a story within a story. By the way, I just want to back up to the key line of this cutting, to go back to page 1112. The sage saying it this way to the king: you have to let your child go, Rama. You cannot count on the physical proximity of someone you love all the time. And then, of course, an important line: a seed that sprouts at the foot of its parent tree remains stunted until it's transplanted. In other words, your parents can only do so much for you. And then it's time for you to get on with this thing called living your life. At 3A, put it in your notes. When you're a junior, you're going to study with me Walt Whitman, the great Walt Whitman in Leaves of Grass, and his most famous poem, Song of Myself. When you reach passage 46, we're going to play this same game. The job of the student is to go on the journey. The job of the teacher is to help the student prepare to go on the journey. As you've maybe seen this sign before, that a teacher can show you the door, but you have to have the courage to walk through the door. Same gig being suggested here. There's a time for your parents to raise you, and then you have to leave, right? The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety, Wordsworth says in that poem we've studied together called My Heart Leaps Up, right? All right, now we're going to get a story within the story, and we're going to find out about this wasteland. By the way, jot down at 3A. When you're seniors, we're going to study together the great poet T.S. Eliot and his most important poem called Wasteland from 1922. And borrowing heavily from this part of the story, the idea that the land is like what you guys live in out here, the Badlands. There's no water, there's only rock. Why is it so bad here? We're going to find out now in a story within a story of what's going on.
Tataka's story. The woman I speak of was the daughter of Suketa, a yaksha, a demigod of great valor, might, and purity. She was beautiful and full of wild energy. When she grew up, she was married to a chieftain named Sunda. 2 sons were born to them, Maricha and Subahu, who were endowed with enormous supernatural powers in addition to physical strength. And in their conceit and exuberance, they laid waste their surroundings. Their father, delighted at their pranks and infected by their mood, joined in their activities. He pulled out ancient trees by their roots and flung them about, and he slaughtered all creatures that came his way.
11:15.
This depredation came to the notice of the great savant Augustia, the diminutive saint who once, when certain demoniac beings hid themselves at the bottom of the sea, and Indra appealed for his help to track them, had sipped off the waters of the ocean. Augustia had his hermitage in this forest, and when he noticed the destruction around, he cursed the perpetrator of this deed, and Sunda fell dead. When his wife learned of his death, she and her son stormed in, roaring revenge on the saint. He met their challenge by cursing them. "Since you are destroyers of life, may you become asuras and dwell in the netherworlds." Till now they had been demigods. Now they were degraded to demonhood.
The source of demon.
The three at once underwent a transformation. Their features and stature became forbidding, and their natures changed to match. The sons left to seek the company of superdemons. The mother was left alone and lives on here, breathing fire and wishing everything ill. Nothing flourishes here. Only heat and sand remain. She is a scorcher. She carries a trident with spikes. A cobra entwined on her arm is her armlet. The name of this fearsome creature is Tataka. Just as the presence of a little loba, meanness, dries up and disfigures a whole human personality, so does the presence of this monster turn into desert a region which was once fertile. In her restlessness, she constantly harasses the hermits at their prayers. She gobbles up anything that moves and sends it down her entrails. Touching the bow slung on his shoulder, Rama asked,